you mentioned Second Corinthians. If you read through Second Corinthians, it's basically a fundraising book.
Yeah.
Scattered throughout all the book is he was raising funds to send back to Jerusalem.
Yep.
For the believers back there who were struggling financially and whatnot.
Yeah, and Paul wasn't he wasn't afraid or shy at all about asking not only for money for others, but for assistance with his ministry. He'd say, "Hey, take up a collection," right? Like you're to do this. You know, and now, yeah, you mentioned America being the most giving nation. I mean, that's not too surprising because we're a pretty wealthy nation. It's just like people, at a larger scale. Third world countries, well, they don't have as much money to go around, so financial aid is going to be sparse. But among Americans,
in other ways, and just to sometimes we, if we have a heart for people who are hungry, and we don't know these people, that's where these organizations can come in and be of value to donors. And there's a lot of small organizations in towns. There's a soup kitchen, there's a food bank, there's a little organization that deals with mental, and so just search out your local community of little groups of people who are, you don't have to give to the Red Cross or any of those big organizations. And the one organization I work with, we work with troubled boys, and it's a residential wilderness program, and so they're there for about 18 months. And it's about it costs about $3,000 a month.
Wow.
Most parents that are in that position do not have the ability to pay that kind of money. And so donors make that up. And so you're helping, you're not helping the organization, you're helping families get help for their son. And when I talk to these moms and dads and whatnot, they're so grateful for people who are willing to love their kids, like they said. They love our kids enough to give to them so that we can come here. So,
well, and I know in the hospital setting, especially, there are a lot of organizations that, like Ronald McDonald House, where, if parents have a child who's in the ICU or, like child cancer, really bad off, they get to stay there for free. And of course, that money is all provided by donors, like you said. But even beyond larger organizations, I like to try and just look around all throughout the day, every day, at the little things that we can do, the seemingly little things that might be absolutely life-changing for others. And again, I started off here saying I need to be reminded of this myself. It wasn't long ago, we were having breakfast at our local Perkins, and there was an older lady who came in and sat by herself at a booth and, ordered, was eating her breakfast. And I thought, when I noticed after a while, nobody was meeting her there. She's eating alone. Some people like to eat alone, I mean, maybe she really enjoys that. But I thought, I should invite her over to sit with us and just talk, get to know her and share. And, then we got to talking about other stuff at our own table, and it was kind of out of sight, out of mind. I just stopped thinking about it, and in hindsight, of course, everything happens exactly as God wills. We know that, but in hindsight, relatively speaking, I wish that I would have, gone up to her and asked her. And I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? She's going to say, no, thank you. I'm perfectly content eating alone. But what if, and that's a very minor thing. But it could totally make that person's day. You never know. You might start a a rest of your life friendship with that person. You know, you might be able to share the truths of God with that person who probably doesn't already understand, most, if any, of them. So yeah, there's so much that we can do.
And that brings up another interesting point. So much giving from a religious standpoint is to make a project out of people. And so, we'll go out on the street and give out food because we want to get them into church. We want to get them saved. And when we have the understanding that we do of God's sovereignty, of God's love, and God's inclusion, we just give people because they need.
Yeah.
Not because we're trying to get to them to do something or to manipulate them. And that's a very freeing way to give.
It is.
It is. And I can
give no strings attached.
I'm not trying to save him from hell,
right?
Because I know God has him.
Yeah. And, and it can be as short and sweet as just, somebody has a sign out by the road,
right.
Out of work, need food. You stop and you give them a little money, and now you'll have a lot of people say, yeah, but what are they really going to use that money on? They're going to use it on drugs, on alcohol, well, I would encourage all of us, if they're there, if they're in need, give freely. We're not called to judge what their circumstances are, having no clue what they are, right? We're called to freely give, and without the expectation of getting anything from them in return. God promises to pay us back, but yeah, we give freely, and in all ways that we possibly can. So I hopefully this little chit chat has been at least eye-opening and encouraging for others.
I remember walking downtown Baltimore with a friend of mine one time, and he wasn't a believer or a professing Christian or anything. This was a long time ago, but some guy had come up asking for money, and Butch was his name. Butch handed him a $5, and we kept going walking. I said, well, that guy's just going. He goes, I have been so blessed with so much money. I'll never miss the $5. And maybe that guy's life is so terrible, he just needs the relief of a bottle of booze, just
yeah. Hey, you know what? If he uses it for that, more power to him. Maybe that's exactly what he needs.
Yeah. And imagine what your life is like if that's the only break that you get, is just getting to drink. Yeah. And so, and boy, that was a life-changing for me, because it was like, well, you're right. And another place that this is kind of adjacent is tipping. A lot of times these gals that are tipping are single moms, or, and so, and I see people trying to get out, tip $1 or whatever. Well, you can make somebody's day by giving them a $10 tip for a $20 meal. Yeah. And you feel good about it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you walk out of the restaurant smiling,
Yeah. Or you give them a $20 tip on the $10 meal.
Right, exactly. You feel better.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Really, I think in terms of feelings, I don't think anything feels better than graciously, generously giving to others in need. There's no better feeling than that. And of course, that's even more true when you do it more in secret and without expecting anything in return from them. And if you get to, from time to time, see their reaction or see the effect that it has on them. Growing up, my parents, I had a really close friend whose parents were very poor and pretty destitute, had a lot of kids. And my folks would, go and grocery shop for them and take them bags of food, pretty often. And just give them money when they needed it to stay current on their bills. But again, there are so many ways we can give aside from just financially. So, just the more we are able, the more we really should, and the more that's going to reflect God and Christ in our lives. So,
yeah, like you said on this subject, this is a subject that's near and dear to me. Another thing that I think sometimes when we give, especially on a personal level, is to look at their dignity. Sometimes people have to accept something, whether in a hard spot or, a lot of times they're there because of they made a mistake or, they screwed up somehow. But if, and that's where giving without them knowing where it's coming from, that can help them to maintain their dignity a little bit and not, feel like that they're living off charity or something like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And of course, we know that Jesus commands to do it in secret. And then he follows that right up in the same passage by, advising to pray in secrecy instead of out for all to see. Because, otherwise we would develop a self-righteous mentality and we'd be puffed up. We become boastful and proud.
There's this us and them.
And then that would, yeah,
we're up here, the donors up here, the beneficiaries down here, and for me that's something.
But it's and what does Paul say? That it's the supposedly lesser members of the body, right, that are given greater glory. So, it's this concept that God weaves throughout his word of, the last being first and the first being last. And, so we do a disservice to God and to that principle when we think or we make claims that, in some way we're superior because we have more. And, it's the cycle, right? Anyone who is in desperate need today may have, they may be flourishing. Their health may be great. They may come into a lot of money, soon. And conversely, the exact opposite could be true. Somebody who is financially really well off now and has great health, they might get some really bad health news from their doctor. They might lose a ton of their money unexpectedly. And now they're going to be the ones in need, right? So we can't predict what that's going to, what the future is going to look like for any of us, let alone anyone else. So, the more freely we give, the more we can relate to others down the road. So,